Another deadline comes and goes in MLB's labor negotiations without a deal, and as a result, more games are being canceled, and there's now a new hangup in these negotiations as well. Things are not looking good, and more games again continue to be canceled. Also, we'll take a look at the NL East rankings, continue our series there, looking at the defensive side of things in the NL East. So we talk about all of that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we are talking about your favorite teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at shortstopball. Check out my bio there to see where I am covering the game of baseball, including the Atlanta Braves over at tomahawktake.com. Cover prospects for Prospects 1500. Cover the Birmingham Barons for Southside Sox, and college baseball for College Baseball Nation. All of those I'm very happy to write about right now, except for Tomahawk Take, because we got nothing really to write about at the moment. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves and give me all your feedback, comments, questions as I try to make this an interactive show with you, the listener. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and please make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Even if you don't like listening to the podcast on YouTube or watching the podcast on YouTube, really does help out the show a ton. Go over there and give us a subscribe on YouTube. And thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. Locked On Braves is free and available on all platforms. So obviously putting out the Wednesday podcast much later than normal, as there's been a big development in the labor negotiations, and another deadline was set by the owner. So was waiting for the result of that. And honestly, it's still kind of ongoing, but I think we're at kind of a deadlock right now. So we're going to talk about those negotiations, where they stand now, how much closer we are to a deal, and how many more games are getting canceled right now by MLB and the owners. And then we'll take a look and continue our series into the NL East rankings, looking at the defensive side of things, where the Braves are really strong in the infield, but got some work to do in the outfield as well. So we'll see where they rank in the NL East. But let's start talking about the CBA negotiations. Once again, we started to get our hopes up for these negotiations to hopefully find a resolution. I didn't really fall for it this time. I didn't stay up till 1 and 2 a.m. like I did a week ago. But it sounded like going into Tuesday night, there could potentially be a deal on Wednesday. There was a ton of optimism, so much so that we were already talking about how to prepare our shows going forward and how things would change. It seemed like it was that close to reaching a deal. And then once again, we get to the deadline, which apparently was 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, and we still don't have a deal. So what went into all of that? What went wrong? It seemed like both sides were getting pretty close as far as the money side of things. Both sides made offers on Wednesday, but one thing came up that hadn't really been talked about a ton. Owners say it's been in talks all along. I haven't really seen it reported a whole lot, or at least it hasn't been a big issue. But all of a sudden, an international draft became a holdup for this deal. Again, it has been lightly mentioned here or there, but it's never been mentioned as something that would hold this up. Seemed like it was always something that the players never wanted, weren't going to go for. And then all of a sudden, the owners made it to where they tied the international draft to qualifying offers and free draft pick compensation for qualifying offers. And that was a bit of a twist that was kind of out of nowhere. We had already heard that the owners had agreed to not have a draft pick compensation tied to players with qualifying offers and to just do away with all that before. But now all of a sudden it became dependent on the international draft coming into this. I'm going to put that aside for a second because, again, I'm not in these negotiations. None of us are. I don't know what exactly is being said. All we know is what's been reported. But I had not heard that those two were tied together. Now, I will say this on the discussion of an international draft, that needs to happen. That has needed to happen for a long time. The international signing process is a complete joke. It's terrible. It's horrendous. We've seen how scummy it can be firsthand from the Braves side of things. The Braves have been severely punished from it, and John Capalella is no longer in baseball because of it. And it needs to be done away with. It is just, it's such a bad process of doing under the table deals with 12 and 13-year-olds. And not only that, the pressure that is put on those players over there to be ready to go at that age to sign deals. It's just, it's a crummy system, and it needs to be done away with. And I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't believe that. But it needs to be done away with. So I will say that an international draft needs to happen. Does it need to happen right now? And do these negotiations need to be held up by that? No, I don't believe so. And I think that's wrong of the owners to really hold negotiations up on something that hasn't really been a huge talking point, again, from what we've heard from reporters until this moment in time. That's the only thing that really bothers me from the owner's side. I believe an international draft should happen, needs to happen. I believe it would be good for the game of baseball to happen, but it should not be something that holds up these negotiations. And for whatever reason, on Wednesday, the owners decided to make that something that will hold up these negotiations. So I wanted to get that point across. I believe an international draft needs to happen. I don't think it needs to be something that holds up these current negotiations. And so moving on from that, the players also made a counter proposal. It was a non-starter, in my opinion, and with the owners as well. They really didn't move on anything. I think they dropped their pre-arb pool number from 70 to 65 with increments of I believe 5 to 10 million a year, where the owners are at 40 million and a flat rate for the next 5 years. So, I mean, they're not really close there, in my opinion. That's a big money gap. They didn't move on the CBT at all, which I just don't understand to this point. I never have in this process, but to not move on that at all when the owners continue to move up on that, that's a bit frustrating. I believe 230 is a fine number. I believe where the owner's offer is on the CBT is a fine number. But again, I don't understand why the CBT is a big deal in the first place when it affects a handful of teams. So I've never really understood that being a big deal, big deal breaker for the players. But anyway, the players didn't move on that. They took off $5 million on the pre-arb bonus pool, and they are very close on the league minimum. I think they came to like 715 or something like that, and the owners are at around 700 or 705. And the minimum is almost a done deal at this point. It's really just the CBT threshold and the pre-arb bonus pool where they are still very far off. But everything got held up because of this international draft situation. You had John Heyman reporting that owners believed there was a deal done in Florida, that the international draft coming into play was tied to draft pick compensation. And players, you had Max Scherzer come out and tweet and say that never happened, that those conversations never took place, that the player stance has always been that they don't want an international draft. So that led to a lot of he said, she said on Twitter, and just the ugliness and back and forth that I just personally hate in all these discussions. I just think it makes the sport look dumb and stupid and turns people off even more when you have this just public he said, she said going on. I don't know who to believe at this point. I don't know who to tell you to believe. Again, I've said it numerous times. I love the game of baseball. I hate the business of baseball. I try not to pick sides in these negotiations. I don't really care for either side in these negotiations. I just want baseball back. But you have a lot of that naturally, and then you have fans going after each other on Twitter, and people taking up for the owners, people taking up for the players. Look, I want baseball. I don't love the situation. I'm mad at both sides. I just want a deal. I will say I feel like the owner's offer at this point is a huge, and I've been saying this for a week or so now. I feel like the owner's offer is at a good place for the players. They have money in the pre-art pool that was never there before. Minimums are way higher. You got a higher increase than ever before. I think the number one goal should be to get younger players paid, and they've accomplished that. The CBT thing, I could give or take that. I could care less about the CBT threshold, but the number one goal to get younger players paid is there. And I feel like the owners have made a decent or a good offer there. And I think it'd be a big win for the players if they just took that offer. But where do we go from here? After they didn't meet a deal by the deadline, Rob Manfred and the owners decided to cancel another week of games. So the new opening day is now April the 14th. I believe the Braves will be in San Diego. I still feel like if they get a deal done soon, they'll find a way to play 162 games. I mean, they're just so close right now. I said on Monday's podcast that they really needed to get a deal done by Thursday or Friday to have 4, full weeks before opening day. So, or before the new opening day anyway. So I still feel like if a deal gets done within the next week or so, they can find a way to play 162 games. But I mean, the calendar is just starting to crunch to a point where it's going to be hard to do at this point to still play a full 162. So what's next? The two sides continue to talk after Wednesday's deadline, trying to figure out this international draft situation. And it sounds like until they get past that, there's really nothing else to talk about and discuss. So once that is resolved, hopefully soon, they can get back to working on the other big items like the CBT threshold and the pre-arb pool, which, like I mentioned, they're still pretty far off on right now. So that's where we stand. I was very hopeful going into Wednesday. We were going to have a deal done, but not at this moment. Still, it is a good sign that they're continuing to talk right now, and they need to not leave the table. Don't just walk away from this and wait till the next deadline to cancel games before having serious discussions. Stay at the table, figure this out, get this done. They are, so close in a lot of these key areas, that they can get this figured out if they just sit down and try to get something done. But we'll see if that happens. Obviously, we'll keep you up to date here across the entire Locked On podcast network. Next, we will get into the NL East defensive rankings and where the Braves stand there. Are you ready to discover your purpose and leave an impact wherever you go? Mission Impossible, written and read by New York Times bestselling author and athlete Tim Tebow, encourages you to find your inspiration, pursue your purpose, and create a life for yourself that counts. Ignite a new spark in your life through this new inspirational listen. Mission Impossible by Tim Tebow is available everywhere audiobooks are sold. All right, so we continue our NL East rankings. Been doing all of these ranking different position groups amongst NL East teams. Today, we're going to focus on defense. And I love defense. I'm a defensive guy, a defensive fan. I've told you this before. I love the defensive side of the game, shortstop being my favorite position, Andrelton Simmons being one of my favorite players of all time, along with Ozzie Smith, Rafael Furcal. I love a great defensive shortstop. That being said, trying to rank teams defensively is a fool's errand. And I'm of the belief there's no good defensive metric out there. And I'm also of the belief that you can't really judge a team or a particular player defensively unless you're watching them, 100 games or so, and you get a feel for their instinctiveness and the plays they make, the range they have. All of that goes into becoming a great defensive player. But we'll do our best here on today's podcast. We'll give you the defensive rankings from 2021, and then I'll give you my overall rankings for each team in the NL East. Looking at 2021 defensive ratings according to Fangraphs, the Marlins actually led all of the NL East in defensive rating at 7.7. Everybody else was in the negative. You had the Mets at negative 3.6, the Braves at negative 5.5, Phillies negative 6.2, and the Nats at negative 22.7. In 2021, DRS ranks, according to Fangraphs, goes Marlins 55 defensive run saves, the Braves at 50, the Mets at 48, and then a big drop off to the Nats at 12, and then an even bigger drop off to the Phillies at negative 54, which was last in all of baseball. Then you look at the number of errors made in 2021. The Braves had the fewest errors in the NL East with 71. Phillies at 94, the Mets at 95, Nats at 96. That's kind of crazy, 94, 95, 96 from those three teams. And then you had the Marlins, who had the best defensive rating, according to Fangraphs, had the most errors in the NL East with 122, which was last in baseball. So that's why I say there's not a defensive metric out there that I really trust, that I put a ton of stock into. You got the Marlins, who led all the NL East in errors, but yet according to Fangraphs defensive rating, they had the best defensive rating in the NL East. So it just seems like every defensive metric I look at, completely tells a different story than another one. Maybe you put all those together and you try to put some sort of math to it and figure it out. I don't know. Again, this is one where I'm going to stick to my old ways. I think the only way to judge defense is to watch somebody over an entire season. And, unfortunately, as much baseball as I try to watch, I can't watch every team. So I can tell you about the Braves for the most part, and really a lot of the NL East teams, you get to see them, 18 times a year or so, but it's really hard to judge, a team defensively unless you're watching them night in and night out. You look at some of the Gold Glove winners and finalists from last year. The finalists you had in the NL East, you had Freddie Freeman, Ozzie Albies from the Braves, you had Francisco Lindor from the Mets, and you had JT Realmuto and Zach Wheeler from the Phillies. And then the only two winners for Gold Gloves out of the NL East actually came from the Atlanta Braves with Adam Duvall and Max Fried. So when you look to rank these, I got to put the Braves number one. I mean, I think they had the best infield defense in all of baseball. Freddie Freeman's a Gold Glove winner. I think Ozzie Albies deserves a Gold Glove and probably will get one at some point. Austin Riley was great, especially in the second half of the season. And Dansby's always been solid at shortstop. I think he's a little underrated defensively for his leadership and instinctiveness, kind of the outside the numbers tools that I think he brings to the game. So I got the Braves number one. Again, they had four guys who were either finalists or winners for Gold Gloves. So I think that's a pretty easy pick there. Then I got the Mets simply because of Lindor. He's a great defensive player, and he plays a primary position in shortstop. Marte was great in center field last year. I'd kind of given up on him as a defensive center fielder, but again, the metrics, whatever you want to take that for, say that he was great in center field last year. Mark Canha and Eduardo Escobar, who they added, were also plus defenders or average or plus defenders last year. So I think their defense will be improved. Realmuto might be the best defensive player in the entire division, and he plays 140 games a year at a primary position in catcher, which, does a lot of work behind the plate defensively. Obviously, a big drop-off after him for sure. A lot will depend on who they put up the middle at shortstop and center field, but Realmuto on his own kind of keeps that defense intact. Then I got the Marlins, made a ton of errors last year, but also, a really young team. I think they'll kind of grow from that and improve. Rojas at shortstop was unbelievable last year defensively at shortstop. And I think they'll have him back there just strictly for that defense up the middle. And like I said, I think with more experience from those young players, I think they'll see them make a big jump defensively in 2022. And then I got the Nats last. Robles is great in center. Valcedes Escobar is actually their shortstop. He's very solid defensively, but that's honestly all I got for them. I mean, I think I put the Nats last in just about every category we've done so far. I don't think it's going to be a great 2022 for the Nats. So building off of that, when we come back, I want to talk about who will play center field for the Braves in 2022, because that could go a long way into how the Braves defense pans out next season. This is the time of year I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost doesn't feel like a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. You have their puffs, which are just amazing. If you haven't tried them, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. In fact, all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Replace your candy bars with these. They are better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, while most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They have delicious flavors from mint brownie, coconut almond, and the new white chocolate cookies and cream, which is what I'm currently eating right now. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. This episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, sometimes even 100% more for the exact same parts at a chain store or new car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you can need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and please write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, so wrap this podcast up. I want to look at the center field position for the Braves in 2022, looking at their internal options and external options as well. And option one, I think, for the Braves is to put Adam Duvall in center field. I don't love this option. I know the guy just won a Gold Glove and he made some good plays defensively in the postseason as well, robbing a home run. I don't love him every day over a full season in center field, but I think that is option number one. I think option one for the Braves to stick out in Duvall in center field. If this season keeps getting pushed back far enough, I think Ronald Acuna Jr. could be ready to go from the jump. You put him in right field and you sign a left-handed bat and stick them in left field. Again, Eddie Rosario, Michael Conforto. I think there's players out there that can be had to stick in left field, and I do think they need to be left-handed. You could put Ronald out there. I don't think they will. I don't think they should, especially coming off major injury. So I think it's Adam Duvall is option number one at the moment. Option number two is putting Christian Pache out there. This is probably my preferred option. Put Pache in center, have Duvall and maybe Rosario, Conforto, maybe platoon in left, or just put Duvall on the bench and have Ronald in right field. Or, until Ronald gets back, you could have the lefty bat that you sign along with Duvall in the outfield as well. So that's my preferred option. I like having that defense out there. Again, I know Duvall's a very good defender, can handle it. But I think Pache is just able to cover, more ground, and obviously, an elite defender in his own right. So I like that option. I don't think either one is necessarily terrible. I think a lot could depend on when Acuna is back and ready to go as well. But those are the two internal options, three if you want to count Acuna. But again, I don't think they would do that or should do that. The free agent options, not a lot out there. The only one is Kevin Pillar, and slash 231, 277, 415 last year, 15 home runs, a 90 WRC plus. He's had better years, but he's 33, 32 going on 33. He's been an elite defender in the past. Again, the metrics, whatever your metrics you want to look at, say he was just okay last year with -1 DRS and 0.4 at UZR in center field, according to Fangraphs. He did turn 33, in January, actually on my birthday, so I should probably know that. He should be cheap, could be solid defensive option off the bench. I kind of look at him as an Ender Inciarte type defensive player off the bench, and I don't really know that he's that much of an upgrade over Guillermo Heredia right now. So I don't really see free agent option out there at the moment for center field, a true center fielder anyway. Trade options, those aren't necessarily great either. I think you're looking at either Kevin Kiermaier or Manuel Margot from the Rays, which I wrote about those options on TomahawkTake.com a while back if you want to check that out. Both are very good defensively. Kiermaier is more expensive, but perhaps the Rays could eat some money in a deal there. Kiermaier does give you a left-handed bat, which I very much want the Braves to get. His splits are pretty even against both those, so that doesn't really give you a huge advantage there. Margot is possibly better offensively at this point. If so, not by a huge margin, but he is cheaper. Both only have 1 year of control left. So again, not a great option there. I don't know that either of those are better than what you have internally. So that's why I think it's either Duvall or Pache in center field. Unless you're going to Getter Ramon Laureano is currently suspended from the A's. I just don't see a huge deal like that happening. Byron Buxton was my dream when the offseason started until he re-upped with the Twins, but I just don't see a ton of great options externally in center field. I think it's going to be either Duvall or Pache. If Pache can win, hit the job in spring training, whatever spring training looks like, which again is a whole nother discussion. If you're going to have a 3-week spring training, how much time are you going to give to guys like Pache who are trying to win a job? But I think Duvall's obviously a solid option as well, but I think it comes down to one of those two to start the year in center field for the Braves. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. You can follow me at Shortstop Ball. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. And we will talk to you next time.